Hi, everyone. Father Kevin here. Those of you who are parishioners, we're sending this out to you. And if somebody else picks it up, well, that's great. As a parish, St. Columba Parish would like to keep in touch with people every day or several times a week, but that's going to kind of depend on you whether you access what we send you or not. Now, I thought maybe from time to time I'd do a short video like this on a topic or a concern that people might be having. So I need to know if this is valuable to you, if you want me to do this, if you do, let me hear from you. Just send a text or something back and let me know if you like these videos or send it to the parish. Okay. It also gives me an opportunity to do something when I have the time to do something I like, and I like to teach. So this gives me an opportunity to say some things about some topics that I care about and that maybe will be of interest to you. And if you have an interest, you can let me know. Today I want to talk a little bit about prayer because this is a time that God has given to us that we can make use of in a very special way, the opportunity to pray. So, to talk a little bit about that is why we're presenting this today. I think that this season that we're in, where we're confined and constricted and limited by our circumstances, I think this is a tremendous time of grace for us and a time that we can really use for our own spiritual development if we want to. So I'm going to kind of encourage everyone, while you're limited in what you're able to do, to take some extra time to pray. And so I thought maybe some people aren't quite sure what prayer is or what to do when they have time to pray. So I thought I'd break it down a little bit for you and share some of my thoughts with you. I'm by no means an expert, and comes from years of practice and years of failing and years of success. So first of all, I want to refer you to a passage from St. Paul to give us a kind of a ground on which to begin our conversation with. Paul writes at the end of his letter, his first letter to the Thessalonians, he says to the Thessalonians, "Rejoice always, pray without ceasing. In all circumstances, give thanks, for this is the will of God for you in Christ Jesus." So as we think about this, when Paul tells us to pray without ceasing, most of us could not conceive of that because we see prayer in a particular way, in a particular format that is kind of limited to a time and to a space, to an opportunity that we might have. What does he mean by pray unceasingly? Well, I think he gives us a little clue about that in terms of all of his letters, because he helps us to understand that prayer is not something that we necessarily stop everything and do, but prayer is more of a way of living rather than a way of speaking or reflecting or whatever. Prayer is a way of being constantly in the presence of God throughout our days. Many of us are familiar with prayer as words, and that's a good place to start. If we think of words as a vehicle, so the words that we have received, especially the traditional words that most of us are familiar with, the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory Be, or some other prayers that you find the words to be helpful. If you can think of the words as simply a way to get us into a deeper space with God. So all the formula prayers that we have, the words that we have, are great opportunities to enter more deeply into that spirit of prayer. But there are many other ways that we can also learn how to pray, especially when we keep in mind that prayer is to be done, as St. Paul says, without ceasing, then we're talking about a way of living our lives and not simply a matter of speaking words. So, first of all, I think what Paul wants to convey to us is this way of living in which we regard God as our constant companion. So that prayer is not something necessarily that we stop to do, but that prayer is something that we live in. And prayer is something that we have confidence in, for we live in a constant living relationship with God. So, but what has to happen for us is that we can't multitask when it comes to prayer, in that sense that we really want to dedicate time to our relationship with God. So there is a way of walking through life with a sense of God's presence and an invitation to live out that presence in the way we relate to one another. I believe that's what St. Paul means. But in our busy lives, what so often happens is we throw a few words in God's direction. We kind of toss some random thoughts or some words or some requests to God wherever God is, hoping that he'll catch on to our particular need, concern, or circumstances. And we don't give God attention. Instead, we simply, well, Lord, I was thinking about this, so here you go. But what about God's words to us? And maybe that's the real crux to me of prayer. What is God saying to me? What is God saying to you? So I think that one of the greatest ways of prayer is simply being attentive beyond the thoughts of our own minds. And being attentive could mean many different things, especially since we use our senses in many different ways. I was thinking that perhaps one of the greatest ways of being attentive is the way we listen with our ears, with our mind, and the way we look, the way we see. These two senses can be great opportunities to enter into a deeper sense of God's presence. So we believe that God is constantly speaking to us, but our heads and our hearts are busy with many, many other things. But when we stop to contemplate and listen to the words around us, listen to the world around us, listen to the sounds around us, listen to the context of our lives, we're going to hear the music that lies below the surface of all things and begin to connect with a reality that is bigger than what we just immediately have at hand. The same thing is true with looking. I think the more we ponder things, the more we look at things and wonder about them, and I'm not just talking about nature, I'm talking about human beings, I'm talking about our relationships, I'm talking about our lives, and looking at the circumstances that we find ourselves in, and looking more deeply than simply, well, what's happening in the news, but what's happening in terms of love and relationship and life and mercy and tenderness and forgiveness and compassion. What's happening can be a vehicle to understand that God is not somewhere else, but that God is uniquely and immediately present to us. It's just a matter of our attention. So we need the time to do that, and we need the space to do that. Sacred time, sacred space. And this time, when our actions are constricted and limited, here's an opportunity to practice some of this kind of attentive presence to the world around us. Attentive presence to the power of God that's at work and flowing through every life and everything. And where do we see it? And how do we see it? And can we contemplate life long enough before we rush off to something else, long enough to see the God who dwells, the God who resides, the God who remains, the God who is present to us? Because he's there waiting to be attended to. So I'm going to invite you throughout this, the rest of this Lenten season, to really be attentive, listen, look, not just on the surface, but more deeply, to see where the power and work of God is unfolding for us. God bless you, and let's hear from you. Thanks.